Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Question and Answer. I am your host, Punyobasa, and these are my co-hosts, Saffron and Fallon, and the kitty who doesn't care what her name is, and so I'm not going to even say it. And no matter how hard I try, it seems like I have been unsuccessful in doing a Q&A more than about once every 3 weeks, which I think is going to have to be rectified because I'm getting lots of questions. So, because of the lots of questions aforementioned, I should just get straight to the answers. And so, the first question is from Home Gear, and I hope he will forgive me if I just mispronounced his name. And Home Gear says, "What is the karma or karma of euthanasia? You said in your previous Q&A that certain actions carry with them certain mental states. You gave the example of killing one's own parents. But what if your father or mother was 90 and suffered from Alzheimer's and were unable to recognize anything or anyone? If they were in an intense state of mental anguish, wouldn't putting them out of their immediate suffering be an act of compassion, and wouldn't that be a rare example of patricide or matricide generating skillful karma?" Well, first of all, I would just like to specify that I'll be answering from a strictly Orthodox Buddhist perspective. My own personal opinion might differ from this, but I've got to adopt some frame of reference, so I'll just go with Orthodox Theravada Buddhism. And also I'll just mention that this issue has come up in real life a few times recently. Like a friend of mine has a mother who's very, very old, and she's fading, and he was asking me about, what if she wants like assisted suicide or something. He wasn't considering actually killing his own mother, compassionate or not, but still, I mean, this kind of issue, it's like a modern issue to some degree. I mean, obviously, killing somebody to put them out of their misery has been around for a long time, but it's more subtle now and more humane, I think, than just taking a pillow to them or something. But from the Buddhist point of view, I mean, you're still killing one of your own parents if you are in fact, flipping the switch or, administering the dose or whatever it is. So, killing one of your own parents is, from the perspective of Theravada Buddhism, one of the few actions that guarantees hell in your next life. Another one would be like causing a Buddha to bleed, which you don't get very many opportunities to do that. Killing a fully enlightened being. And the third, I've seen two different versions of the other one. It's either raping or seducing a nun, or else it's causing a schism in the Sangha. And I'm not sure which is the more orthodox of those two. But that and killing one of your own parents, those are the four guarantees of hell in your next existence. So here at the bottom, Home Gear is asking, wouldn't that be a rare example of patricide or matricide generating skillful karma? Well, it could generate some skillful karma, but it would just be mitigating the unskillful karma of killing one of your own parents, because I don't think it's possible to knowingly and willingly kill one of your own parents without there being some real turmoil going on. Even if it's subconscious, it's going to be like really serious mental states going on. And so obviously, if one of your parents is like terminally ill and in a lot of pain, and you just pull the plug on the life support machine, that's obviously going to have different karma than like Lizzie Borden with her axe. But still, it's going to be, from the Buddhist point of view, again, it is going to be the very serious act of causing the death of one of your own parents deliberately and knowingly and willingly. So you'd be better off letting the doctors take care of it, or if they're able to pull their own plug, that's their choice. But doing it for them is playing with very big fire. And just from the Buddhist perspective, I would not recommend it. Don't kill your own parents. Next question is from Jeremy. And this is one I've considered more than once also. Jeremy says, if I do not take rebirth, if the next existence is not me, then why should I care? Other than a lack of compassion, why should I live a good life so that another should benefit? Humans and animals remain ignorant, but I think I read somewhere that hell and deva beings know what karma or intentional actions got them there. So that knowledge may be a contributing factor, a knowledge of continuity, ? So essentially the question is, since Buddhism, orthodox, traditional Buddhist philosophy teaches that there is no abiding entity, no ultimately real abiding self or soul, then why should we care if our actions are going to be causing suffering to some other being, in the subsequent existence? And I mean, if you really consider it, then there's an obvious sort of counter argument, and that is that if there is no abiding self or soul, any separated individuality that is ultimately real, then I mean, we're not the same from one moment to the next. So why should we even care if our actions now are going to cause our own misery an hour from now? I mean, it's the same kind of argument, the same kind of phenomena in play. So, I mean, there are people that will knowingly and willingly make that decision, like devil worshippers, I suppose, who are willing to make a deal. I mean, I assume, this is the way traditionally it is interpreted. They make a deal with the devil so that they get what they want for the rest of their life, or 10 or 20 years, and then they go to hell. And then they're willing to make that, they're willing to make a future them go to hell. And it just strikes me as foolish. And even if you just consider, your next life to be somebody else, then callously just not caring if they're going to be happy or miserable, even though they're very similar to you, it'd be like, even if it's not you, it's, in a way, it's sort of like your brother or your doppelganger or something. Yeah, I think you should care, just because, if you're knowingly and willingly causing suffering, even to a future version of yourself, then yeah, I mean, that's bad karma. The bad karma is going to affect you even in this life. I mean, when you're doing it, it's going to be affecting you even at that moment. And so, yeah, just don't send some future incarnation of yourself to hell. So the first two questions we're really hitting it hard. It's like, don't kill your parents, don't go to hell. Next question is from Nagarjuna. And Nagarjuna says, what are your thoughts on Osho? And I have written a few blog posts about Osho. I don't know, I could just sit here and just sort of ramble for half an hour about Osho. I do think that he was definitely a trickster figure. He may have attained some kind of realization. He could deliver a 2-hour-long Dharma talk every day. And even that is impressive, because I've had to give like 15-minute Dharma talks every day, and I'm like scratching my head after like this first or second week as to what I'm going to be talking about. One idea I've had about Osho and people like him is that just because you're at a higher level of consciousness doesn't mean that you're more virtuous necessarily, or a better person necessarily. Osho was very rascally. You know, he got first pick of all the pretty sannyasins at the ashram and all that. But I've been thinking that, you know, a monkey is at a higher level of consciousness than a sheep. But nevertheless, a monkey is a lot naughtier than a sheep. Just because you're serene and all that. Yeah. So, my thoughts on Osho. I'm very skeptical that he was enlightened, although I have met a few people that knew him personally. And there was this German artist I met in Indonesia who I asked him if he thought Osho was enlightened. He just went, "Pfft, it was obvious. Just obviously he was enlightened." And then I've met another disciple who was one of his senior disciples, actually, who... I mean, he was sort of non-committal. You know, he wouldn't say that he wasn't, but he wouldn't exactly say that he was either. But I've never really been much interested in Osho. I generally still think of him as the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and I have a lot more respect for a person that used to be his right-hand man, and that was Swami Ananda Tirtha. I think is what he used to be called. Nowadays he's Paul Lowe, and he resonates. His teachings resonate with me better than Osho, because I've read a few books by Osho, and he does say wise things sometimes, but it's very glib, and I don't always agree with what he's saying. So I think that's enough of an answer for that one. And so I move on to the next, and the next question is from JT Drake, and JT says, "Not sure you see these comments, but if you do you have any thoughts about this book?" And then he provided a link. So I clicked on the link, and the book is Buddha by Karen Armstrong. And I haven't read the book, so I really don't have much to say about the book. Although I have read two books by Karen Armstrong. Both of them were good. One is A History of God, which is a history of Western monotheism. And the other one was a biography of the Prophet Muhammad. And both of them were good books. But with regard to the book Buddha by Karen Armstrong, I wouldn't really even want to read it. Maybe someone who doesn't know much about Buddhism, you know, they want an introduction, you know, from a Western perspective, it might be good. Karen Armstrong is a good author. But she was a Catholic nun, I believe. And she definitely, I mean, she's not a Buddhist. She might be interested in Buddhism. So, I mean, probably it would be the standard, you know, biography based on Western scholarship of what the historical Buddha was like. And she probably wouldn't be very knowledgeable with regard to the deeper aspects of Buddhism, or you know, like the rules of monastic discipline, that sort of thing. So if you really wanted to know about the Buddha, I think a book by a Western Roman Catholic might not be your best bet. But Karen Armstrong is an intelligent and good writer, and she does have some wisdom, so I'm sure it wouldn't be a total waste of time. And so the next question is from Arain. And Arain says, "Could it be said in Buddhism that people who are gifted with psychic abilities or other advanced attainments in this life may be on an upward progression, having reached certain spiritual attainments in their prior life?" Well, it may be. Is that what's... Yeah, it may be. But then again, it could be the opposite. I mean, just because you've got a person who's got, you know, psychic talent in this life, it's possible that they're gradually building up, and maybe in the next life they're going to be in a heaven realm as a deva or something. But it could be the other way around. It could be that in their past life they were in heaven, and then they exhausted all of their good karma, or, you know, the good karma that was keeping them up there with all of the, you know, celestial nymphs and pleasure gardens and everything. So maybe, you know, they just took a step down. And for some strange reason, that reminds me of something my father told me. he was a hypnotist and did a lot of past life regressions and that sort of thing with other people and also with himself. And he said that he never met a guy who had been a woman in his previous existence who wasn't, in my father's words, queer as a $3 bill. So the reason I bring that up is that like an effeminate man, he may be progressing, like in his next life he's going to be female, or it could be that he was female in the past life. He's just sort of a transitional state. And it could be the same way with these people with gifted with psychic abilities or other advanced attainments, as in the question. So it could go either way. They could be on their way up or on their way down, or maybe they're just holding steady, or there's an infinite number of possibilities. So the next question is also from Erain. And this one is not entirely serious, methinks. Erain says, if the earliest teachings taught no soul, can we assume the Buddha was a ginger? I mean, he was depicted as a blue-eyed Aryan. Yeah. Well, Led Zeppelin also says big-legged women don't have no soul, but we can skip the big-legged women, I guess. So, yeah, it's not just no soul, though. It's no self. It's no, like, intrinsically real individuality of any kind. I mean, it's like this glass of orange juice. I mean, from the Buddhist point of view, this glass of orange juice does not have an intrinsically real self-existence. It's just here, or it seems to be here, due to all this whole vast, unthinkable web of causes and effects. And so this seems to exist because of all the causes that cause it to seem to exist. And if the causes ceased, then it would cease. It's like a fire. The fire exists so long as you've got the heat, the fuel, and the oxygen. And when the heat, the fuel, and the oxygen, or any of those three, ceases to be sufficient, then the fire ceases. And that's the way we are also. So long as the causes of our existence persist, we seem to persist. But it's not due to any intrinsic self-existence. It's due to the cosmic web of causes and effects. And the Buddha may have had blue eyes, and there's a good chance he was Indo-Aryan, but I'm not sure that he was a ginger. Although I have read in ancient Hindu texts that the stereotypical Brahmin in India had blue eyes and red hair. So I don't think that has anything to do with no self, though. And so we'll just move on to the next question. From Bodhisattva 969. And Bodhisattva 969 says, how useful is this life in times of corona when you are still allowed to work or not go to the cinema or go on vacation? My strength is slowly exhausted, my well-paying job pukes me, and my fellow human beings who don't seem to be interested in anything. I know enough about Bodhisattva 969 to be reasonably confident that he lives in Germany, which is probably much more dystopian in times of corona than, say, South Carolina, where I am right now. South Carolina is almost completely normal at this point, and never really got out of hand because it has Republican governance. But in Germany, we're more in the realm of cyberpunk dystopia. I don't know what it is about the Germans. So what's the question here? I mean, how useful is this life? Well, I mean, anything that occurs to you, it's occurring to you because of your own karma. It's just the fruition of your own actions and mental states. So you have to learn to face it. It's sort of like the movie Groundhog Day, where you have to keep doing it over and over again until you get it perfect. So you have to learn how to deal with with equanimity with anything that comes your way. So this is just a test, it's a trial, and you have to maintain your equanimity to some extent, or at least your mindfulness. Yeah, I mean, that's it, really. I remember in Eckhart Tolle's first famous book, he was saying that, being mad at other people is like standing in front of a mirror and being mad at your own reflection, because really, whatever's going on around you is the fruition of your own karma. It's really ultimately your own doing, even though ultimately we don't exist as intrinsically real individual beings. So, yeah, I can just wish you luck and just do your best. Maintain equanimity, trying to live a dharmic life. Don't lash out. Don't vent your unhappiness if you're experiencing it onto others, especially people close to you. And try to maintain some mindfulness, some level of mindfulness. And good luck, especially in Germany. So the next question is from Das Boot. And Das Boot says, "For me, it's quite something to have an outlet for thinking aloud and asking about anything even remotely connected to Buddhism, completely without having to censor myself in any way." Well, that's good. So, on to the next weird question. For me, it seems like the WEF, and it turns out that's the World Economic Forum. I had to inquire about that. I didn't know what it was at first. So I'll just start over. For me, it seems like the WEF, AI, and Internet of Bodies psychopaths are trying to construct something that to me feels like some type of forced materialistic hypersamsara. Would that actually be possible to kind of ensnare people's souls or whatever that is a composite phenomena perceived as such, and actually keep them in this state for a long time span? Would Buddhism need to add a realm for that even? I don't think Buddhism would have to add a realm for that. Gosh, where to even start with this one? So apparently you've got like the globalist, whatever you want to call it, the globalist elite who are trying to essentially control the human race by controlling their thoughts, by controlling the information, the propaganda, ministry of truth and all that, in order to just keep people locked into this false narrative, semi-true at best, in order to keep them docile and, producing money for the elites and, helping them stay in power and so forth. Yeah, I mean, that sort of thing has just been the status quo for humanity. I mean, if it's not, the World Economic Forum and the internet and TV and all that, it's fanatical priests or, giving fanatical sermons, it's just like the taboos and narrow-minded cultural traditions of certain cultures. I really don't think that. I mean, there is some truth to the saying in Ecclesiastes in the Bible that there is nothing new under the sun. I mean, obviously, the internet seems pretty new, but still, human nature remains the same, and the situations we find ourselves in have parallels or analogs to past states. I really don't think that anything is really all that different now. It could be that in the future everyone's going to have the chip in their neck that's going to, keep their brain under control or something, but I think those of us who have better karma just won't wind up in that particular version of reality. And that version of reality, there's an infinite number of worlds. So places like that already exist, I assume. So I'm not even sure if I answered this question. Would that actually be possible? Yeah, I assume it would to some degree, although, I mean, you can't fool everyone all the time. There's always going to be a certain resistance, people that are red-pilled or whatever, and to ensnare them and actually keep them in this state for a long time span. Most people just spend their entire life that way anyway. Just normies, you listen to normies' conversation, depends on the normies, of course, but, the working class guys, they'll just talk a lot about music and sports and video games and maybe food sometimes. That's just sort of the virtual reality that they're in. Bless their hearts. I mean, they can be really, good guys, but still, it's like the average person is not red-pilled. They're in the matrix and they don't know that they're in the matrix. So, yeah, I think something like what Das Boot here is talking about, I mean, that's just the everyday reality of most beings in the universe, I would assume, to some degree. So let's move on to the next question. And this is from Potila. And this is kind of a difficult one, even though it's a simple one. What political figure, alive or dead, do I most admire? If I were Heru, and some of you probably know who that is, I know what the answer would be already. Yeah, I don't know if I really have, I don't have like a designated favorite, it's like, ooh, this is my favorite. But I think one of the most interesting political figures would be Julian the Apostate, who was the last pagan emperor of Rome. I have, my heart goes out to people who fight for lost causes, and he fought a lost cause of trying to defeat Christianity and maintain Roman paganism, and obviously he did not succeed. He was only emperor for a few years, and he may have been murdered by a Christian Roman soldier. He got his liver pierced by a spear while fighting the Persians. Aside from Julian, I don't know. Most admire. Yeah, that's the admire part. I mean, like Charles II of England, or Great Britain. Yeah, he was really interesting. He'd be fun to hang out with, but I can't really say that I admire him. So, yeah, let's just say Julian the Apostate. And I'm sorry to disappoint anyone who was expecting me to say Ashoka or something. So, let's just move on to the next question, also by Potila. Another question. Since moving to the South, how many times have you been invited to church? I think you should go to a megachurch service and just take in the experience like an anthropologist, get to know your neighbors sort of thing. Surprisingly, the number of times I have been invited to church here in the Bible Belt of the USA is 0. Although I've been told that people do ask other people to come to church, and it's it's not like they're trying to convert you so much as they're being friendly. They're just inviting, hey, come along to church with us. But I think most people that I know that I'm a Buddhist, and so I think they're not even that dog just won't hunt. But if somebody did ask me to go to church, I might, just out of curiosity. Sure, I'm open-minded. But all the Jesus stuff, it's hard for me to follow, because you have to believe this story that you couldn't possibly prove, and maybe you won't even know if it's right or wrong after you die. I'm just don't have that kind of faith. I do have a deeper nonverbal kind of faith, but believing in a narrative in a book that you just couldn't possibly prove one way or the other, Yeah, it just doesn't appeal to me at all. I just don't get it. I gotta click something here. Okay. So let's just move on to the next question. This is also from Potila, and it is a meditation question. Can you please elaborate on the idea of establishing mindfulness in front of oneself? Excerpt from Majjhima Nikaya 10, which is, I assume, if I remember correctly, the Satipatthana Sutta. It's when a mendicant gone to a wilderness or to the root of a tree or to an empty hut sits down cross-legged with their body straight and focuses their mindfulness right there. Ida bekoe bhikkhu aranyagatu va rokamula gatu va sunyagara gatu va ni siddhi panlankam abujitawa ujum kayam panidaya parimukam sati upata pedwa. Just mindful, they breathe in, mindful, they breathe out. Okay. I think it is fairly straightforward, but have you encountered several different interpretations and would like to hear your thoughts? Okay, so the question is, what does it mean? I assume, this is my interpretation. The question is, what does it mean to establish mindfulness in front of yourself? And I had a Sri Lankan monk ask me about this once too. And personally, I mean, some people will say, oh, you're supposed to focus, on the, like, here or here, which is in front of your face, the front of your face, you focus on that. I think that it's just a kind of a figure of speech in Pali, very ancient Pali, like the Atthaka Vagga. To prefer something means you set it before you. That's like a figure of speech, and it's used several times in very ancient Buddhist texts, that if you are preferring something or favoring something, you put it in front of you. It's just a figure of speech. And I assume that's what they're doing here, where you put mindfulness in front of you. I mean, that is your, what's the word? You are just favoring mindfulness. You are establishing it as your priority. That's what I think it means. So I think I'll move on to the next one. And maybe I'll flatter myself in congratulating myself that I answered that one so quickly. So Potila has another meditation question. Sorry, but it's long. This is about vicikiccha, or usually translated as doubt or indecision, something like that. It's not being able to settle your mind. You've got two conflicting ideas and you can't really settle on one of them, something like that. In the Dhamma, unlike many God-based religions, there is a path in which vicikiccha is uprooted and removed. A tangible result of practice is the removal of doubt, indecision, something that happens gradually as a side result of realization, or is there a specific approach to remove vicikiccha? In the theistic paths, there is an immense focus on the importance of faith, but it often is spoken about as something that the God blesses you with. There is no process to remove doubt, but as the Buddha Dhamma is a path to replicate, all the pitfalls have been examined in detail, and the resolution of vicikiccha seems very important to make higher progress. What helped you to uproot vicikiccha? Well, there are ways of going about it. I mean, obviously, just satipatthana mindfulness, it arises, you note it and you let it go. Every time it arises, you note it and you let it go. So you're not feeding it and strengthening it, and gradually it just fades out. It's sort of like, with no offense to the co-hosts here, like a stray dog. If it hangs around, if you feed it, it's just going to stay. But if you don't feed it, it might hang out a little longer, but gradually it's going to hit the road. And, vicikiccha, or any kind of unskillful mental state, is the same way. If you don't feed it, it'll starve or just go away. Let's see here. Scroll down already before answering the question. So, through insight, it can just poof out of existence. I mean, you'll have some insight that's really radical, and it'll just shift your consciousness right there. And then, I mean, it can just fall away. That's a possibility too. It's not just one way that it can happen. Just like following some of the teachings of like the Buddhist suttas, like the removal of distracting thoughts. There's several different ways of going about that. I mean, obviously you're not going to have much vicikiccha if you're just not thinking. So, just getting into meditative states where you're not thinking, and then you can have insight arise from that. It's like so long as you're not thinking these absurd thoughts, then you're liberated from just all these just really self-inflicted unhappy mental states. So yeah, I guess I would say that there isn't just one possible way, and the standard way in Theravada, or the two standard ways, would be just mindfulness, just mindful noting of it. You just note it and let it go, note it, let it go. Every time it arises, you note it and let it go. And then so that you're not feeding it, you're not reinforcing it. And then the karma just gets weaker and weaker and fades out. Or just through deep meditation. Although in the text, vicikiccha can be a hindrance to, or an obstacle to deep meditation in and of itself. So you'd have to get past the vicikiccha, at least temporarily, to get into the deep mental states. And then you can see from your own experience the benefits of not only not thinking these worrisome and like indecisive thoughts. I mean, just thinking itself is just inferior to just sitting in silence with your mind wide open, clear like glass. Although thinking is necessary sometimes, especially if you're like trying to solve a Sudoku or something. Okay, next question. Also from Potila. Potila's last question. This one is about demons or dark forces. Did you ever encounter non-human beings, demons, ghosts, petas, etc., during your time of practice? I mean, something categorically different than just fear, a sense or presence of a being around you or trying to influence your behavior. You noted one story of a ghost interaction, but did you ever have the feeling of something more hostile? If so, what did you do? Many texts say to meditate on metta as a protection and antidote. Was this your approach? As a monk, I can't recall any kind of encounter with some sort of hostile supernatural being. I mean, there's the time that I got attacked by ogres that some of you may know about, that I've written about, which personally I think may have just been a waking dream. And I won't go into the details, but and it wasn't me who said that I was attacked by ogres. It was just, I explained what happened to this Burmese monk who was very superstitious. He had a degree, like a university degree in English, but he just had like these protection tattoos all over his body to protect him from the evil eye and hexes and ghosts and everything. And he was just convinced that I had been attacked by ogres, because there were supposedly ogres in this forest. So yeah, the only time I can recall of feeling a presence of like really just a dark, negative kind of feeling, I was about 20 years old, I think. And I just moved into this crummy little apartment over the summer. And that apartment just had like this really bad vibe to it. And so I was already interested in Buddhism at the time. So I just tried to exercise whatever it was. You light the incense and the candles and do some chanting and read sacred texts and that kind of thing. And it apparently worked. But that's about it. But there is another thing. It's like maybe one reason why I didn't have any problems like that is because I was just a monk doing intensive practice. I have a friend, I used to have a friend, a Balinese monk who mostly lives in Burma. And when he's back in Bali, he has an attendant named Noman. And Noman would say that one reason why he has so much respect for this monk is because he can see spirits. Noman can. And he can see spirits, and most people have got spirits kind of hovering around them trying to influence their behavior. But the spirits just stayed away from this monk. They wouldn't come near him. And that's one reason why Noman had so much respect for this monk. Is like his dharma was so good that the spirits knew they couldn't really influence him or manipulate him, and so they just left him alone. And who knows, maybe when I was practicing intensively, that sort of thing was going on with me too, and that's my excuse for not having demons attack me. I don't know. So I'll just move on to the next question. And this is from Yuichiro. And Yuichiro says, in your experience, have you been able to talk to trees, animals, etc., or feel their energy? A lot of yogis say they can communicate with nature by being aware of its energy or something. I just want to talk to trees. They seem nice. Well, I don't think trees would even have any kind of conceptual mental process. When I think of trees, it's like if you go out into a forest, like a primeval forest, you're out in some big national park away from the other people, there's these huge trees all around, there's just this feeling of presence, just this vibe. And that could be, you're tapping into the mental states of a tree, because I don't think that they're sitting around or standing around, philosophizing or thinking about, gee, is this nice and sunny today, isn't it? I think that they just have this, it could just be like a carrier wave or a hum or something, if they have any consciousness at all. And Buddhism does allow that plants do have a very simple kind of consciousness. They're called ekendriya jiva, which is one faculty life. They don't think, they don't see or smell or hear, but they have the sense of touch, according to ancient Buddhism. So with regard to trees, if you just get a feel in the forest, that could be it. Just some very subtle, deep kind of a feeling that might be as intellectual as trees get. Talking to animals, though, have I been able to talk to animals or feel their energy? I think just about anybody, if you're not just a sociopath, just completely closed off, you're going to have a certain amount of empathy with, especially if you got a dog. Cats, they're different, but, like the dogs, you just kind of tap into each other's energy. There was one time in particular when I was in Burma that it was practically, it was like telepathy or something. There were these two dogs at this monastery, just scroungy Burmese monastery dogs, and they were brothers, and everybody liked one of them, and it was like almost everybody just did not like the other. Like, I remember once this novice is calling the dog, he had a piece of meat or something he wanted to feed the dog. The wrong one came, and he hits that one, and then the other one comes and he feeds him. It's like, even the dogs' names. One was called Po Shot, which is like dear little rascal, and the other one was Ngade, which just means like scoundrel. And I liked scoundrel. I liked him way better than the other one. It's like my heart goes out to like the troublemaker kind of dogs, just the rascally ones or something. They just can't help it. They don't know any better, and they need love. And so I liked the scoundrel called one. And one time, I was just hugging him, just giving him a hug. And all of a sudden, I just got this rush of just joy and pleasure. And I looked down, and the dog was obviously feeling the same thing. It was just like this connection happened. This sort of like love flowing between us or something. And I'm sure he loved me, because I was practically the only being in the world that really like cared about him, So, yeah, it can happen. It's like, but I think it happens with everybody to some degree, unless they're just a total sociopath. So I'll just move on to the next question. Also from Yuichiro, is telepathy possible? And I would say, yeah, it's possible. I mean, anything is possible. Anything that can be imagined is possible. A lot of stuff that can't be imagined is possible. So yeah, telepathy is possible. Even if scientists can't explain it, and they probably never will explain it correctly. And so the next question is also from Yuichiro. Have you felt your own chi or energy? Well, that's kind of similar to the one about the animals. It's like, everybody feels their own energy. I haven't felt it in accordance with like Chinese medicine where it's going through the special channels, the spleen channel and that kind of thing. I haven't really experienced that, but I mean, obviously we feel our own energy. I'm not exactly sure what chi is supposed to be. It's really not like an Indian Buddhist concept. I think the Indian Buddhists have got something else like prana, which would just literally means breath, but it's also like the life force or the energy of life or that sort of thing. But I think we've all felt it, especially when we were younger. I mean, when you're like a kid or a teenager, it's just it's like you're high on chi a lot of the time. So I'll just move on to the next question. I may not have answered that one very well, so I'll just hasten on to the next one. And this is from Hey It's Tig. And Hey It's Tig asks, have you considered doing a full show on U Pandita? I know you have a section on him with Heru, and it was so interesting. I read your article, A Fellow at Pandita Rama, back when it was available, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to read it later. But yeah, I'm just wondering if you're planning on doing a show about it. Yeah, U Pandita was one of the world's foremost meditation masters when he was alive. He died several years ago, I think. I spent a few months at his place. In fact, he participated in my ordination well over 30 years ago. And yeah, I mean, I could talk for half an hour easily about U Pandita. I just have bad karma with regard to teachers, I think. Like, some people, they go to U Pandita and he would just, they would just make all this progress, and, you have these famous meditation teachers in the West claiming to be disciples of U Pandita. And I went to Pandita Rama, and he's just like an angry old man. I mean, he would get angry pretty much daily, and just sort of irrational and just hostile a lot of the time. So it was like I would see a different U Pandita than other people would see. So I mean, there could be just as many U Panditas as there were people who experienced him. But I think another option, which might even be better if I were to just do a whole video just talking about it, would just be the Mahasi method in particular, in general. I mean, because U Pandita was a teacher of the Mahasi method. He was a disciple of Mahasi Sayadaw. So, and most Western Theravada Buddhist meditation is based either on the Mahasi method or on the Goenka method. Like the IMS places, the so-called, insight meditation societies, they're largely based on the Mahasi method. So that might be even better, because U Pandita, being a teacher of the Mahasi method and a disciple of Mahasi Sayadaw himself, he'd fit right in. And Mahasi Sayadaw, it's like a lot of people in the West have never heard of him, including people that consider themselves to be serious Theravada Buddhists, but he is one of the most famous monks in Burma. There are Mahasi centers all over. It's like in America, you got a Chinese restaurant in every town. In Burma, you got a Mahasi center in pretty much every town, worthy of the name of town. So yeah, it's possible. I think I could do that. Especially if people keep pestering me to do it. So I'll just move on to the next question. That's from Matthew. And Matthew says, from your understanding of archaic pre-Theravada Buddhism, did it describe the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path? Well, if you go all the way back to just primitive Buddhism, then like the oldest text, like the Atthakavagga, it doesn't really mention the Four Noble Truths. But the Four Noble Truths are very early. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is considered by tradition to be the Buddha's first sermon after his enlightenment, and it's largely about the Four Noble Truths, plus the middle path. So I would not be surprised if the historical Gautama Buddha himself taught the Four Noble Truths. But I do not think that originally the fourth noble truth, which is mega sacha, or the truth of the path. I mean, I might as well just start at the beginning. At the beginning, the first noble truth is dukkha sacha. The truth is that any conscious being in this universe is going to suffer, is not going to be fully satisfied. There's a certain amount of unease that just permeates individual or seemingly individual existence, conscious existence as an individual being. It's just built right in that you're going to be at least slightly unhappy or slightly uncomfortable, that just pure bliss just isn't an option. So that's the first noble truth. Second noble truth is the cause, samudaya sacha, the cause of suffering, and that is desire or clinging. And clinging, or what's the word? Upadana in Pali. In a way, it could be interpreted as just insisting upon things being a certain way. Now, that or just craving in Pali, tahna, which literally means thirst, are considered to be the cause of suffering. Whenever you're unhappy, it's because you want something. That's one of the most important things you can learn from Buddhism. If you only know one thing about Buddhism, it should be the second noble truth, which is if you're unhappy, it's because you are desiring something. And that desire is volitional, ultimately. I mean, it may be that you're just doing it through knee-jerk reflex, and you don't realize that you have a choice, but ultimately you have a choice. Third is nirodha sacha, the truth of cessation, and that is just logically, it logically follows from the second noble truth. The second noble truth is suffering is desire is the cause of suffering. Third noble truth is if there is no desire, there is no suffering. That's the cessation of suffering, is the cessation of craving or desire or attachment. And finally, you've got Maggasacha, which is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And I think originally it was not necessarily eightfold. The Buddha may have taught there is a path, and that would be, practicing Dhamma and self-restraint, self-discipline. But if you look in the suttas, there's also a tenfold path where you've got right liberation, and I can't remember what the other one is. And there seems to have been some a certain amount of mutation going on before they settled on the Noble Eightfold Path, which is, let's try not to embarrass myself here by getting it wrong. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So I think the formula of the eightfoldness of it may be later. It may, it's pretty likely that it came after just the idea of there being a path. And whether the Four Noble Truths really go back to the historical Buddha, I can't really say for sure. That the texts that are considered to be the oldest are more into don't believe anything. And then like the formulas and that sort of thing came a little later in the history of Buddhist philosophy. But it is very early, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Buddha did teach it. And even if he didn't teach it, it's very early. But the eightfoldness of the path, I think, is later than the Four Noble Truths. So, move on to the next question. And this is from the Marquis de Sade. And the Marquis says, what is your opinion on Islam as a spiritual system? Islam. Well, it arose during the Dark Ages in a barbarous culture, and so it is kind of a Dark Agey, barbarous kind of a religion. At least they're honest about the Prophet Muhammad, in that, even just the Muslims themselves admit that he was, a bandit and a rapist and so forth. But I mean, there's going to be people with spiritual talent born all over the world, and people with spiritual talent born into a Muslim culture are in all likelihood going to be Muslims. And so you do have wise and good Muslims. Like the book that I mentioned earlier, by Karen Armstrong. I mean, she pretty much she'll make apologetics for Muhammad, just saying, he is just a product of his culture, and the culture was very barbarous. But in the other book, A History of God, that I read by her, she does mention that there have been some very wise Muslims. So I personally could be a Muslim more easily than I could be a Christian, simply because there's less of a story that you have to believe. Like I already mentioned, I'm not good at believing narratives that you can't really prove or disprove, and there's less of that in Islam. I mean, all there is essentially is God is one God and Muhammad is his prophet. I mean, you believe that, and you do the bowing to Mecca and so forth, and that's good enough. Do the Hajj if you can afford it. Sacrifice a camel. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that Islam is one of the few major religions nowadays that still promotes animal sacrifice. If you do the Hajj to Mecca, you're supposed to cut the throat of a camel. Although I think nowadays, camels being expensive and all, they mostly substitute it with a goat. But Sufism, I think one reason why Sufism has as much wisdom as it does is because it borrowed a lot of stuff from Buddhism and Hinduism when they came in contact, like in northwestern India. So, yeah, I mean, if you really want to live a spiritual life, I think you might do better to choose a different religion than really any of the Abrahamic ones of the West. But, I mean, some people just have a personality or a character where it just fits, just something just resonates. It just works for them. Maybe they're just got a devotional kind of temperament. They need to worship somebody. And so, Jesus might really work well for them. So I'll just move on to the next question. I don't want to badmouth Islam so much that I get banned from YouTube or something. So let's see. Next question from the Marquis de Sade is, what are some of the teachings in Mahayana or Vajrayana you see as useful or complementary to Theravada? Well, I think some of the most useful teachings of Mahayana, and I really don't know all that much about Vajrayana, but in Mahayana you got Pragya Paramita, Pragya. I used to pronounce it Prajna, but then I was talking to a professor who taught Sanskrit, who he said it's Pragya Paramita. Of course, he could be wrong. He was wearing these weird pajama-like clothes when I met him. We were at an ayahuasca ceremony. So anyway, yeah, that and like Nagarjuna's Mula Majjhimaka Karika is, in a way, it complements early Theravada, like the teachings of the Atthakavagga that I talk about all the time. Majjhimaka philosophy of Mahayana Buddhism, it's very similar in certain ways. Like the Atthakavagga has been called proto-Majjhimaka, and Nagarjuna's Mula Majjhimaka Karika, it uses like ruthless logic to just destroy any kind of philosophical idea so that you wind up with emptiness. And that can be useful, that can be helpful. Again, with regard to Tibetan Buddhism, I really don't know enough about it to pontificate on the subject. And anything that really doesn't agree with Theravada, then which is a lot of Mahayana, like the Pure Land stuff, for example. Yeah, but if it is like an elaboration on early Buddhist philosophy, then I think that could be very useful, because Theravada arose before formal logic really became established in India. And so the logic of Theravada Buddhism is pretty shaky sometimes in their philosophy. But by the time Mahayana was developed, they had a much more sophisticated logical philosophy established in India. And so Mahayana Buddhist philosophy can be very subtle, to the extent that you just don't see in Theravada, except in like a very simple, archaic kind of form in the very oldest texts. So, yeah, with regard to this question here, what are some of the teachings in Mahayana or Vajrayana I see as useful or complementary to Theravada? Yeah, I would say, like the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, and also Nagarjuna's Mula Majjhimaka Karika. Some of the other Majjhimaka philosophy is. It can be very helpful to help you kind of wrap your head around certain Buddhist concepts, or just stop even trying to wrap your head around anything, which is even better. So, next question, also by the Marquis de Sade. Would steroids and antidepressants be prohibited in the fifth precept? Also, do you follow the fifth precept strictly? So, technically speaking, the fifth precept is, I undertake the precept to abstain from ale, wine, and other intoxicants which cause cloudedness of mind or heedlessness. Anything that makes you stupid and semi-conscious, you should avoid. So let's see, steroids and antidepressants. If they make your mind cloudy, put you into a stupor, then yeah, they would be included in the fifth precept. But if they don't, steroids, like Red Bull, I think has steroids in it. At least the Asian version, like the Thai version, had steroids in it. Maybe you're talking about anabolic steroids or something. I'm not sure what kind of steroids were in Red Bull. Pretty sure even vitamin D is a steroid, technically speaking. Antidepressants, again, not necessarily. If it doesn't put you into a stupor or make you semi-conscious, or just sloppy and careless like alcohol can do, then yeah, I don't think it would be included. Also, do you follow the fifth precept strictly? No, I do not. I do, this is just orange juice, but I do have the occasional beer. Come home from work on a hot day, cold beer goes down real nice. So I have been mildly inebriated since I dropped out of the monkhood for recreational purposes, not just medicinal. So yeah, I fess up to that. So let's just move on here. Next question, BPAT427 asks, If one dies in a state of equanimity due to drug or alcohol-induced delusion, how would that influence their karma and rebirth? Well, a state of equanimity due to drug or alcohol-induced delusion. Yeah, equanimity, I mean, there's right equanimity, I suppose, and wrong equanimity. Like a cow is pretty equanimous. And it could be that you die in some kind of blissful stupor. You might just get reborn as a cow or something, because they're pretty blissful a lot of the time, it seems like. Anyway, they got equanimity. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's much chance of getting into heaven from dying in a drug-induced blissful state. I've never taken heroin, but I've been told that it's going to be very intensely blissful. But I don't think you're going to get into heaven by shooting up. So, yeah, the answer to that was, I mean, if the equanimity is essentially a stupor, then you're going to, you're going to be generating sort of stupor karma that may land you in some existence that is even more stuporous than this one, or stupid than this one. So I'll just move on to the next question from Chaplin. And Chaplin says, can you explain the process and requirements of being ordained as a Theravada monk and your own ordination? Well, there are some who claim that Theravada monks are not even ordained. They just declare themselves ordained, but that is certainly not true. In the Buddha's time, according to tradition, he would just say, Ehi Bhikkhu, come monk, and that was it. That was, you were ordained if he called that out to you. But after the death of the Buddha, they had to establish like protocols for ordination procedure and so forth. And in the Ganges Valley, which is where Buddhism began, there has to be an ordination ceremony with no fewer than 10 monks participating. But outside of the middle region, which is the Ganges Valley, outside of that, which would include the USA, Europe, Australia, southern India, wherever, all you need is five monks in good standing to conduct the ceremony, which would include the preceptor. Also, there should be at least one monk who is an expert on the rules of monastic discipline, so he'll know how to do everything properly. And then there's a questioner who, before a person is ordained, he gets questioned because there are certain disqualifying characteristics that can prevent the ordination from being valid. For example, you have to be a human being. So like non-human beings just shape-shifting and assuming human form can't be ordained. You have to be a man if you're going to be ordained as a monk, which also means you have to have the family jewels intact. There are a number of rules, like you can't be a runaway slave, you can't be like an AWOL soldier, you can't be anybody who still has obligations to the government, you can't be a debtor. You have to have the permission of your parents if they're still alive. And also there's certain diseases, including leprosy, that if you have those, I think tuberculosis, and there's a few others, epilepsy, for example, if you have those, you're not supposed to be ordained. But some of these, it's like the ordination is still valid. Like somebody who has epilepsy, if they are ordained, or if they don't have the permission of their parents, they get ordained. It's just the monks conducting the ceremony commit a very minor violation. It's called a dukkha offense, an offense of wrongdoing, but the ordination is still valid. But if you're not human, or if you're not a fully intact male, then it's just the ordination is just null and void. And Some monasteries, especially like in Burma, you can just walk in and be ordained, just boom. But a lot of places, they'll require you to be like a monastery attendant for a while. That was the case with me. I was a monastery attendant for like 2 months, washing dishes and driving the monks around and that kind of thing. And then you do the ceremony where you have to have the 8 requisites before you can be ordained, which is 3 robes, a belt, let's see if I get this right, the bowl, your alms bowl, a razor for shaving your head and face, a needle for mending your robes, and a water filter. So you have to have those intact. And then the ceremony itself lasts, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. And then you're a monk, fully ordained. On the other hand, to drop out of the monkhood, all you have to do is just tell somebody that you're not a monk anymore and mean it. And they have to understand what you're saying. And then you're just not a monk anymore. So monks can't ordain themselves, but they can drop out of the monkhood themselves. So long as, there has to be one other person that they tell, but the other person really doesn't have any say in the matter. So I think I got the basics of that. So I'll just move on to the last question from Chaplin, which is also the last question of the evening. And that is, who is the Samana Johann character that likes to spam all over your blog articles? Well, long time ago, when I was still a monk, I was contacted by someone calling himself Samana Johann, and he was asking me to participate in some Dharma forum that he had going. But first of all, his English was so horrible that, I could hardly understand what he was trying to say. And secondly, he was just struck me as like just a rigid dogmatist. And I really don't have much use for that. Just people that think they know something when all they're doing is just parroting books. And you can find that in all traditions. It's not just Theravada, obviously. So I didn't join, and then he took the liberty of joining me up himself, and I started getting spammed. Like my inbox was being spammed by this sort of gibberish, semi-English Dharma essays or something. So I just started flagging them as spam until they stopped coming, because to unsubscribe was such a complicated Byzantine process that it was just easier to just flag them as spam. But later he started, right when I announced that I was going to drop out of the monkhood, he just went into a spamming frenzy of just delivering admonishments and scoldings and so forth, because he apparently very much disagreed with my plan of dropping out of the monkhood. And I wrote a blog post partly about him, and after a while he sort of apologized and stopped scolding me, and then just recently he started up again. he just can't hold it back. But I don't know, it's like some people, they can be fundamentalist Christians, or they can be Buddhists or Muslims or whatever. They've got it in their head that they have been, they have seen the light, and they know the true way, and anyone who disagrees with them is just plain wrong, and they do not hesitate to let you know that. And I do not consider that to be symptomatic of wisdom, but of course they certainly do, and so there's not really much you can say. And so I just don't want to really wallow in this. I have no ill will towards this person. Just answering the question, and that was the very last question. And so I think we're done. And be happy.